Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I guess you're seeing me kind of up close and personal. I never actually get to see what these images are going to look like until I go live, but I hope everyone's doing well. First of all, as usual, I need to ask, can you hear me? Is everybody hearing what I'm saying? And I think we have some people online. Yes, wonderful. You can hear me. Great. This microphone is doing its job. And once again, all the equipment and stuff that I've added and such is because of you Patreon supporters, the folks who have supported this channel for so long. So thank you so much. So once again, we did a voting, a viewer poll. We didn't have a lot of votes, but at the same time, that's my fault because I didn't post it. It was more like, I think about 36 hours ago when I posted the poll. So I really didn't give you guys much of a chance to vote. And there was one vote separating the topics. And with one vote separating the topics, we might talk a little bit about both. But the first one the one that won out was the Breakthrough Starshot Initiative. A lot of you may have heard about this. There was a documentary about this particular project called the Pale Red Dot in reference to Proxima Centauri. And the question is this something that we should be spending our money on? Because it's going to be an involved project, and I'll explain it real briefly for those of you who are not that familiar with it. The idea is because we have such micro miniaturization of technology these days, to send out a small sat, something that weighs a gram or two, with a solar sail about the size of a tennis court or so, and you use a 50 gigawatt or gigawatt, as some people would like to say, laser to power it for the space of a few minutes. And you would need to keep the laser focused on it for that entire period of time. And it would also have to be very reflective, the material that receives this laser power, rather than, and if it didn't, then it would just simply melt the laser. So it would be a very, very precise operation. However, if you could do this for the space of a few minutes, it would accelerate the light sail up to about 20% of the speed of light. And so, that being the case, there's a 10%. It's a substantial percentage of the speed of light. I'm starting to now trust myself now all of a sudden, since I'm not looking at a computer. But it is a substantial percentage of the speed of light, allowing us to explore Proxima Centauri in the space of about 20 years. So yes, it would be 20% of the speed of light in order to accomplish that. So the question is, of course, you would have a probe zooming past, 15 to 20%. Thank you, Framrick, just for clarification. Once again, I doubt myself quite often when I do these things live and I don't have a chance to double check myself and my facts. So the idea is it really worth it for us to invest all the money that it's going to take to, build a laser array that's going to generate this much power to send a probe all the way out to Proxima Centauri, or multiple probes? Another idea is to send out a whole fleet of them, and they will only be able to fly through the solar system of Proxima Centauri for a very brief period of time, perhaps Alpha Centauri as well. And then after that, they're going to, blow straight through the solar system in the space of a few hours, and that'll be it. They'll take photographs, they'll send us some information. The information will take 4 years to get here, but we will receive information firsthand from another solar system, which, a few years ago we thought was impractical or impossible. So, here's a question from Framrick already. Since it would take between 20 and 30 years to complete the journey, I wonder if there's a danger that we'd have better imaging and detection in that time, making the probes redundant. Yeah, absolutely. We might very well have better imaging by then, and it might, whatever, probes that we send out might not give us as much reliable information as we could gather from here. Johnny Spacer points out after launching the probes, the lasers might be used to deflect asteroids. Very good point, Johnny. It's actually one of the reasons why I look upon a photon drive, as it is commonly called, as one of the most attractive forms of alternative propulsion. After we use it to propel breakthrough Starshot, we can not only use it to deflect asteroids, we can also use it to propel ships across the solar system. Something that powerful, yeah, sure, it may not be able to drive a ship, to a percentage of the speed of light, but it would still drive it very, very fast and allow us to get to Mars in the space of a couple of weeks instead of 6 months. So such a system would serve a lot of practical purposes besides just breakthrough Starshot. Dr. Loeb, Loeb, is one of the proponents of this. He's I believe, the chairman of the entire project, and he's a big believer in the possibility of extraterrestrial civilizations and extraterrestrial life. He's the one who postulated the idea that the Oumuamua object that flew through our solar system was actually a light sail. He provided some very, very compelling information to prove that, or at least to indicate that it was a strong possibility. He was mocked by a lot of his contemporaries for doing so. So this is a guy who definitely is outside the mainstream. He comes up with theories about a lot of astronomical phenomena and connects it to the possibility of extraterrestrial civilizations and extraterrestrial life. And I think that he would be most interested to see whether or not Proxima Centauri and the Alpha Centauri system has any kind of life at all, which would, be an amazing discovery in of itself. Even if we do discover life here in the solar system inside of the next few decades, to discover it in another star system might be quite remarkable. Also, to discover it on a planet that has, a breathable atmosphere, a place that we could eventually colonize once our ability to travel interstellar, becomes a greater possibility. All these things, very exciting prospects to a guy like him, and certainly something like me. Framix says, but it would be so cool to send something on Earth, made on Earth by humans, to another star system. Yes, it would indeed. Right now, the Voyager spacecraft are never going to get to another star system, or at least not, in the foreseeable future. And I'm talking the next several million years. They're in interstellar space now, but they're not bound for any other star system. They're eventually just going to float through interstellar space forever, until eventually we catch up with them and put them in a museum someplace, or some alien civilization stumbles across them. But they're not bound for any kind of other solar system, so evidence of our existence is not on its way to anywhere. So yeah, it would be neat to send something like this out. Construction of such a laser would definitely raise some eyebrows, says Cyclonics. Thank you so much, by the way, all the way in Australia, awake at this time of night. Thank you so much for showing up. I really appreciate it. And by the way, here's the dreaded Boeing Starliner Cup. Just a quick reminder to everybody watching, thank you for tuning in. 40,000 subscribers. We're getting there. Got past 28,000. I think I'm at 28,300 and some odd right now. So we need to get to 40,000 subscribers, and then I'll either be blowing this thing up or sending it into into suborbital space or something along those lines. Okay, Framrick says, I guess one of the problems would be keeping funding and interest over a 30+ year project. Imagine a future government defunding the deep space network required to receive the signals, rendering comms back to Earth worthless. Yeah, that's a possibility. We send the things out and we never hear from them again. Yeah, yeah, that would be a grim possibility. But another reason why this is something that should be funded by a mega, a multi-billionaire rather than a government agency. Okay. Absolutely, says Framrick about we are talking about the combined output of 100 gigawatts worth of lasers, although 10 per. Suggested to use space-based lasers, definitely interesting in terms of space-based weapons agreements. Yes, something that powerful could definitely be weaponized, which would, there'd be some interest, or I think there's a strong argument to be made then for breakthrough Starshot to be an international endeavor for the Russians, the Chinese, for everybody to be involved in this, for everybody to, to have an ability to shut it down, perhaps, to have a kill switch for it in case, somebody tries to do something with it. That might be a good reason to make it an international agreement because yeah, something like that could definitely be weaponized. Pretty frightening. Now, of course, if you put it on the ground, then it's not as bad. Then it could just be used to destroy satellites and things like that. Unless I suppose you could find a way to reflect the laser to another target somewhere on the earth. There's always ways we can use that we can find ways to kill people with our new technologies. Okay, Cyclonic says maybe construct the laser on the far side of the moon so it can't affect Earth. That's a hell of an idea. Keep it in an orbit that's constantly in the moon's shadow, or just simply put it on the far side of the moon, or dark side, as I continue to like calling it. Damn it, I'm stubborn about that. But in any event, yeah, that's a really good idea. Then it can't target Earth. It's impossible. So yeah, that's a really good idea. Okay, do you think the scientific advance of sending a number of tiny imaging probes to a different star system is worth it? Flags, footprints to show that we can do it. Yeah, that's a tough question. Real quick, hello, ASN. Real quick, what would you like me to say about total space? Because I would like to make an announcement about it, but if you could quickly type what you would like me to say about, I just had an interview that was recorded on total space. I want to make sure that it gets a quick shout out during the course of this live stream. Total Space is a podcast network about the exploration and colonization of the solar system. They were kind enough to have me as a guest. I think I'm going to be a guest next week as well. So this is pretty exciting stuff. Total Space becoming multiplanetary is due to be released tomorrow. In other words, on Monday. And if we could post the link one more time for me, please, so I can get it into the description once we're finished today, just to make sure that I'm sending the viewers to the right place tomorrow and the right time. Okay, so all of that having been said, so that's Total Space. Very interesting stuff, and they've got even more interesting stuff. They can find okay, you guys can find a link on my Twitter account. Yes, I did post it there. So just go to my Twitter, you'll find the link that'll take you there. We have a very interesting discussion coming up next week. And I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, ASM, but I think it's something regarding a mini starship. And I'm not going to say anything else besides that. Now, I'm not sure if that's what we're discussing next week, but I think we are. So I'm very, very excited about that. So that's coming out. I'm reporting that will be coming out not this Monday, but the Monday a week from Monday. We'll be talking about the mini starship. So there's some very, very interesting stuff. It's also called Mars Direct 3. So, like I say, aggressively advertising for another channel, but ASN or another Space Nuts has been a very, very strong supporter of this channel. So I want to see that I can do everything I can to make that podcast network successful. Framrick's going to be there too, by the way. Okay, back to the topic at hand. Do I think that it's a good idea just to do a plant a flag, that sort of thing? Well, no, only if we gain really compelling scientific knowledge that we can't gain otherwise. Is this really worth it? But if we can figure out exactly where Proxima Centauri b, the planet that we think might be habitable, if we can determine its exact location and how to intercept it, we're going to get some pretty close-up photographs of it that can be well analyzed. Okay, thinking about breakthrough Starshot and the Fermi paradox, if we can envisage sending a huge number of tiny probes over light years to other star systems, can other civilizations send tiny probes our way too? Yes, absolutely they can. As a matter of fact, I think they already have. It's just my opinion. There's no way we would have been able to detect it if they had already done so. But if there are sophisticated civilizations anywhere near us, they are aware of our presence. Um, why have they not signaled us? Well, they may not know how to. And guess what? We're not sending out any signals, are we? There's been a very, very strong argument right now as to whether or not we should be aggressively sending out our own signals. Is that really a good idea? So far, we really haven't done much of that. Virtually none of that, actually. Yeah, Oumuamua, says Cyclonics. Perhaps that was one of those probes. If you talk to Dr. Loeb, he thinks so. He believes that that's the case. It did fly straight through the Goldilocks region of our star system. I mean, it flew right through our orbital path, not really close to the Earth. But then again, if they sent it out from a long ways away, they may not have been that precise. It just simply flew through the habitable zone of our star. That's a huge coincidence that the first interstellar object that we ever detect happens to pass within the Goldilocks zone of our own star system, plus all the other many things about Oumuamua that are unique compared to every object that we have detected in our own in our own solar system. Rendezvous with Rama, yes, that is another thing that's been talked about quite a lot. As a matter of fact, Oumuamua was going to be called Rama at first, and then it was changed because of the connotations of that name, because it's, as for those of you unfamiliar with that book, it's a famous Arthur C. Clarke novel where an interstellar object comes through. We catch up with it. We thought it was an asteroid, but it actually turns out to be an alien craft. A long cylindrical asteroid like alien craft. So, is Muamua something like that? Well, there are many things about it that are very unnatural. The most specific of which was the sudden acceleration that it experienced, caused by the impact of photons on its surface, at least as far as we can tell. Now, others are saying that no, it was just some kind of outgassing from ice evaporating. Well, if that's the case, every bit of ice on that asteroid should have evaporated within very, very close proximity to our sun. There should be no ice left on that asteroid. Or if there were tons of ice and the sun didn't evaporate at all, then it would have been a comet and it would have been really obvious and we would have spotted it. The whole notion that it was just some outgassing from some ice that evaporated at that moment when it was an enormous distance away from the sun is absurd. And once again, as Dr. Loeb said, and I listened to an interview with him yesterday, when something happens that doesn't fit into our own understanding of, of what we think the truth is, the scientific truth is, if there is an anomaly, our reaction is simply to say, well, it must be something that fits into our current understanding of things rather than something different. We haven't figured out what it is yet, but that's got to be what it is, rather than exploring other possibilities. And one thing that he says is that many scientists who wield an enormous amount of power in the scientific community will never change their view on this until they die. So until these people die off, the attitude's never going to change. We are never going to look upon strange astronomical phenomena as possibly being extraterrestrial in nature until we get a new crop of scientists who are open minded enough. He also called our attitude an island of knowledge in a sea of ignorance, which I thought was very telling. So, anyway, back to this. Wormhole alien, isn't the Starshot supposed to act as a mothership and drop probes at the target? My understanding is that Starshot, now that may be a new idea behind it, but Starshot, it has to be really, really small in order to be able to accelerate to the speeds that we're talking about. Avinash, our topic today is breakthrough Starshot, the concept of sending a very small probe to Proxima Centauri using solar sails and very powerful lasers. Framrick, the mothership takes 1,000 or so probes into high altitude orbit, uses the lasers to accelerate each probe. Yeah, that very well could be. And that mothership, by the way, could be the Starship, and it could take a whole bunch of these probes up there. And then, as I say, once the all the probes are dispatched, the laser blasts one after another after another. It recharges over the course of a couple of days and then sends it through. Excuse me. Framrick, breakthrough Starshot. It would be nice to set up a moon infrastructure first. Launch the probes from the lunar surface or even lunar orbit. Manufacture them there with lasers on the dark side of the moon. No atmospheric interference, no weapons usage. Yes, Avinash, breakthrough Starshot, second closely voted topping Interstellar visitors, perhaps. Okay. Yeah, and, already we've kind of been talking about that. We got 200 people watching right now. Real quick, I want to apologize. Even though the live version of this only has the little ads that you may be noticing, because of the video I released yesterday, which for some reason the algorithm didn't like. After the first couple hours, it was doing really, really well, and then something stopped the video cold in its tracks, and it forced me to monetize this video. The recorded versions are actually going to have ads. I'm very sorry, but I really didn't want to start off the month with a dud. So it kind of left me with no choice in that regard. But at least right now, I think you guys should be seeing just these little ads on the image itself. And once again, I have no idea what it looks like. I have YouTube Premium, and so I don't get any ads. Okay, so that's my apology, but all right. So Cyclonics, I worry that any possible alien civilization that detects a Starshot probe would see its speed and think it to be a threat. That's an interesting possibility. A small little bomb of some kind, antimatter or something like that heading their way. Wouldn't that be an excellent way to cause tremendous damage to an enemy? I mean, only a single gram of antimatter could still produce a pretty substantial explosion. So yeah, perhaps that could be interesting. Thank you, Framrick. I appreciate what you just said there. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's keep her going. And like I say, we can drift. The second place topic is something I never talk about, and that is the more credible UFO events that have taken place. I never discuss it simply because, well, for my quick explanation, regardless of how convincing some of these events have been, we don't have corroborating evidence of any of them. We can't measure them in a laboratory, unlike the astronomical events that we have seen that suggest the presence of extraterrestrial life. The UFO events are impossible to corroborate aside from the testimony of the people who saw it. Now, the testimony of people who see these events, sometimes in the case of the Phoenix the Phoenix Lights events, thousands and thousands and thousands of people saw the same thing. So that's a lot of corroborating evidence, but still, we didn't track it on radar. We have no recorded evidence to suggest that, that's what was actually seen, et cetera. So that's why I don't talk about it. We don't have the scientific data to support, these assertions. All we have are some images, some testimony, but again, nothing that we can put in a lab and quantify. So that's one of the reasons why I don't talk about UFOs and UFO topics. But I wanted to open it up to see if anybody, wanted to possibly discuss it, because I'm open-minded enough to discuss these things, and I don't really give a damn about my reputation when it comes to these things compared to other folks. Okay, Breakthrough Starshot says, Framrick, it would be nice to set up a moon infrastructure first, launch the probes from the lunar surface or even lunar orbit, manufacture them there, which would not be tough given how small they are. Lasers on the dark side of the moon, well, thank you, or the far side of the moon. No atmospheric interference, no weapons usage. Avinash, Breakthrough Starshot, then a close second voted topic. Interstellar visitors, perhaps, yes. Okay, cyclonics, I think we already saw that. Okay, Johnny, instead of a laser, build a huge mass driver, an electromagnetic launcher on the moon to launch robust, tiny interstellar probes at near light speed. Wow, that's an interesting idea. I don't think anybody's ever really looked into that. I'd be curious about the possibility. How much energy would it take? Um, Framrick says, I think the probes only weigh a gram, so hopefully passing through a system at 20% of the speed of light would not generate too much concern. And then Framrick answering Johnny Spacer, I really like the idea. Particle accelerator is a ring that accelerates particles close to light speed. A mass driver circular ring could accelerate 1 gram probes to a high speed and then release. Yeah, that's a very intriguing idea. Maybe that's a good alternative to explore interstellar space. Um, so yeah, it sounds like there's definitely some interest in this, and there should be. I mean, to never ever explore, the stars around us firsthand, I think is an unfortunate thing for a civilization that can understand these things and see these stars and yet not explore them. That's unambitious in my opinion. Power provided by solar on the peaks of eternal light. All right. So, in any event, well, we'll keep the conversation going once again, just to remind you, I am monetizing this one, although not the live version as much. Just these little ads here don't actually yield much result. But of course, there are other ways to participate. As always, just to mention, if you want to If you want to join Patreon, become a Discord supporter for 75 cents an episode, because I do this every Sunday. I have not missed a single Sunday since I started this. You can be part of the discussion, and also support this channel, which is of vital importance in order for me to keep it going. So thank you. You guys' support have made all the difference in the world in making all of this work. Hey, Tom, I'm glad that you're here and listening. Thank you for being a part of it. So let's see. So let's, since this came in second place, we can talk a little bit more about the whole UFO thing. I don't even know why I'm cleaning the stains off that Boeing cup. It's gonna be messed up a lot more than that here soon enough. The whole UFO thing, the Phoenix Lights issue incident back in the 90s is one of the most famous, one of the most credible events. Thousands upon thousands of people in Arizona, in the most populated region of Arizona, saw pretty much the same thing. A V-shaped pattern of lights that they describe was on a dark craft approximately a mile in diameter, a V-shaped dark craft. This has been explained as, the latest explanation was flares being launched from a nearby military base. However, a very close analysis of the images provided by the people who filmed these things and the cameras in the 1990s were not the cameras we have today, but they compared it to what flares look like versus what those lights looked like on that particular night in Arizona, and they're not even remotely the same. The explanation is obviously bunk. And the governor of Arizona made a joke in very poor taste where he says, "We found the culprit of this particular event," and he brought out a staffer dressed in an alien costume. The press had a good laugh, and that was the end of it, leaving thousands of people in Arizona enraged because they felt they weren't being paid attention to. Interestingly enough, that very same governor, after he was no longer governor, admitted that he saw the same thing that the rest of them saw. And by the way, look this up. It is true. He saw the same phenomenon that the rest of them did, and he came up with that press announcement to avoid panic. He actually said that on camera. It's amazing. So once again, was the Phoenix Lights our, first contact event? We can't, but the thing of it is, we can't define it as that. We didn't track this thing on radar. We didn't get clear enough photographs of it to undeniably say that this was an alien spacecraft. Why didn't they show up in the middle of the day if they wanted to make their presence known? Why did they show up at night? It's just all still very strange to me if they wanted to announce their presence in such an obvious fashion. Now, I can understand why radar didn't track them. An extremely advanced civilization that could travel between stars could also, avoid radar detection. It wouldn't be very difficult. Probably a pretty good idea, given that our anti-aircraft defenses are based on radar. But still, once again, we have no evidence, no data whatsoever to support this, aside from the testimony of thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people that I don't think are crazy, who saw something that we can't explain. And that's as far as we can take it. And so, we really shouldn't go any further than that. From a scientific standpoint, and the Tic Tac thing, same thing. Okay, so let's get back because we've got people making comments about the other topic. Johnny Spacer says we built communication cables that span the globe, making an interstellar probe-lit accelerator that circles the moon would not be the realm of reason. Yes, going back to this whole concept of a mass driver to create an interstellar probe, very, very compelling idea. Um, Cyclonic says there's a lot of stories about lights appearing on the lunar surface, meteorites or UFOs. Cyclonics, I would say meteorites impacting. Sorry, have a bit of a headache again today. Are the more likely explanation. Meteoroids strike the lunar surface on a regular basis and would create flashes and that sort of thing. But there are astronauts who have claimed to have seen things as well. I mean, there's some very credible people who have claimed to have seen things. But once again, credible witnesses, that just simply isn't enough. Now, ironically, that's enough evidence to, get a conviction in a murder trial. But then again, you need a body, don't you? And we don't have the body. We don't have the actual physical evidence of the crime being committed. That's all very important. Framick says, I'm doubtful about a lot of sightings, but Oumuamua is the most intriguing potential probes or visitors we have ever seen, I think. I agree, Framrick. Avinash, in the courtroom, one needs motive and opportunity. What's the motive for a visitation with visual contact but without actual contact? Very interesting. And we, once again, as human beings, it's tough for us to determine the motivation of an alien civilization. They may have motivations like ours, they may not. They may have simply wanted to announce their presence to let us know that they're here, and that's about it. Maybe that's all they wanted to accomplish, was just simply to make us know that they're present, and we should take that into account when we venture out into space ourselves. Hard to say what a motivation would be. What is an alien motivation? Hard to tell for something that's evolved on an entirely different world with an entirely different type of thinking. Johnny Spacer says, I think the Phoenix lights were military drones flying in formation, but then why fly them over a large city? I agree, Johnny. It is strange if they were military drones flying in formation. For one thing, the the witnesses all claim, many of them claim to have seen these things really close, and yet they moved without a sound at all. But yeah, that is one possibility. The drones in the 1990s were not nearly as sophisticated as the drones that we have today, and they do make a little bit of sound, and these flew without any noise whatsoever. Not a single witness claims to have heard even a propeller spinning or anything like that. And you're right. Why fly them directly over Phoenix? If this is a new type of military drone that you are denying the existence of, you go and tell the world, tell the American public that these things are flares or whatever because you're trying to hide their true identity. Why fly them over one of the most populated regions of the United States? That's a really huge military cock up, if I can think of one. It is weird. It is very strange. And by the way, it's passed into almost complete obscurity for those of us that weren't alive when the Phoenix Lights incident happened. We don't even talk about it. We don't even hear about it anymore. It's as if the whole incident has been forgotten. And it's very, very strange. Framrick says got to be a lot of black operations or research aerospace activity that can be mistaken for UFOs. I would agree with that. Once again, if the witnesses are to be believed, whatever was over Phoenix was entirely too huge to be anything produced here on Earth. Talking a V-shaped craft, a mile in diameter. Now, once again, that could be complete nonsense. Humans have a tendency to connect lights, through a psychological phenomena. That's how we thought we saw canals on Mars. That could be how all these people thought they saw a huge craft over Phoenix, when all they really saw were a bunch of lights flying in formation.
Neil deGrasse Tyson points out that eyewitness accounts are the highest level of evidence in the courtroom, but the lowest level of evidence in science. True, Avinash. Yeah, I would agree with that. Cyclonics, the Battle of Los Angeles. Yes, absolutely true. No movie that horrible could ever have been produced by an actual Hollywood organization. That had to have been a real alien invasion, because nothing that awful could have possibly been produced by Hollywood. Okay. For those of us unfortunate enough to have sat through that movie, that really messed up alien invasion movie. And there have been a whole bunch of them, by the way, but man, they spent a lot of money on the special effects for that piece of trash. In it anyway. Okay, so we got more people typing. Like I say, yes, the human brain can make illogical leaps and connections based on unconscious bias. We all desperately want to believe, and the UFO phenomenon has penetrated our culture now. It is true. If I were to see something like that flying directly over my head, sure, I would have my own thoughts and conclusions. However, if something like that flew over Phoenix today, we would have a ton of cell phone cameras, focused in on these things, using IR, using all kinds of methods, low light essentially, and all kinds of things to get a better image of what was actually up there. It is unfortunate that the Phoenix Lights incident took place in the 90s instead of today. Oh, an actual UFO sighting of the Battle of Los Angeles is an actual event. Well, Cyclonics, I don't know about that one. Thank you. I'll have to look that one up. That's interesting. Now you've got me intrigued. I'm gonna have to look that one up. So thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that. I actually don't know a thing about it. Okay. So yeah. A lot of interesting stuff happening in the skies, to be honest. And once again, I think a lot of it is just experimental stuff that we're doing, but we humans are doing. But still, there's a lot of stuff that's tough to tell. Of course, the flying Tic Tacs are another really famous one. We've got a lot of footage of those things. We have a lot of pilots talking about how they're moving impossibly, flying suddenly from right over the ocean to way up into the stratosphere and beyond with sudden impossible maneuvers, etc. The problem is none of the footage actually shows anything that the pilots are talking about. They even make mention of a whole fleet of these vehicles flying, and being detectable on radar, that sort of thing. These pilots actually talk about that, but we don't have anything to corroborate that. All of the radar data from this particular incident have not been made public. Witnesses on the ships that track these things say that, officials showed up, took all of their records, and left with them. Once again, do we know that for certain? No, we don't. We can't say for certain that any of this happened. And it is a bit of a problem. And by the way, the whole Battle of Los Angeles incident has actually been posted here, a link on it. A good example of using dash cams, cell phones. The meteorite in Russia that detonated above the ground picked up by dash cams and cell phones really well. Yeah, that's true. If we had a Phoenix Light incident take place today, we would get a lot more information about it. A pity that if these were aliens, that they don't come back and give us another show. Or why the hell not fly over Phoenix in the middle of the day? If you really want to announce your presence, then there would be no question of what's there. So, once again, this is why I don't really talk about these things in my episodes much, except perhaps on a live stream. We just don't have the data. Okay. Hey, Andy, how's it going? Thanks for showing up. Appreciate you being here. Thank you for posting that about the Battle of Los Angeles, also known as the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, the name given by contemporary sources to a rumored attack on the mainland United States by Japan and the subsequent anti-aircraft artillery barrage, which took place between late February 24th and early 25th. Now, once again, we have to keep something in mind about events that took place during that time in the immediate aftermath of Pearl Harbor. The American public and our coastal defense systems were ready for some sort of incident to take place, with the Japanese showing up any day on the west coast of the US. And radar was in its infancy as well. Who knows what we might have picked up at that time? And it could very well create a huge anti aircraft barrage firing at nothing. That is entirely possible. But once again, who knows what they actually saw? Who knows what they might attract? It's very difficult to tell. Bio balloons. I'm not as familiar with that. Johnny has something to say. Okay, back in the 80s when I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, I was out in the evening in the middle of the desert surrounded by amazing mesas. I was watching the sky, which was partly cloudy, and the sky above was full of stars. It looked as though it was moving like an armada of aircraft. It had to be the clouds creating the illusion, but it seemed they weren't moving, the stars were. Yeah, there are many, many credible witnesses that have a lot of stories that are difficult to understand, or rather to explain with natural explanations. However, once again, we just don't have the we can't, confirm this stuff through laboratory experiments. For example, once again, going back to the Tic Tacs, if we actually had some footage of these things doing the impossible stuff that they were reported to have been doing, that would be one thing. If we had the radar data at our disposal to show what these things were doing, that would be something else. But we don't have any of that. And that makes it very difficult to confirm what is actually happening, aside from the testimony of people who know what they're talking about. We're talking about U.S. pilots who have, by the way, declined to come forward for a variety of different reasons. But once again, we can't say for certain what's really going on. Okay, so Framric says the topic is UFOs. Yes, it does seem to have drifted that way, making the stretch that sightings could be something. What is more likely? Interstellar visitors who would need FTL, time travelers who would require FTL and time traveler, or travelers from elsewhere? Many worlds theories of quantum mechanics requiring some way of traveling between universes. I'm afraid until evidence prove otherwise, all seem equally unlikely. Yeah, I do tend to agree. We need evidence. We need evidence of some kind besides just testimony. And besides just, well, I saw the radar and the radar was doing this. Okay, where's that radar data? Let's examine it. And we don't have it. So until we have all of that stuff, it's tough to determine. Now, I also watched some YouTube stuff from an organization that's a big advocate for warp drives and other forms of very extreme types of propulsion. Who claim that the Alcubierre warp drive has made a number of new in advances. A number of new innovations have come forward to significantly reduce the energy requirements of the warp drive. And if that is indeed the case, then traveling from star to star becomes a lot more possible. Japanese balloon bombs. Andy Brown just put that on there. Very interesting. I didn't even know the Japanese had those. How about that? Well, that would be an interesting explanation. Cyclonics, you're going to need to clarify that as well. You seem to know more about this stuff than I do, a hell of a lot more when it comes to the question you just asked. Okay, Framrick says linking some other topics on Discord. And once again, just to remind you, if you want access to all this stuff that's currently being linked, or if you want to be an active part of this conversation, easy to do. It's all in the description on how to be a Patreon supporter. And it's as little as $3 a month. And if you can't do that, then just subscribe, like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that so we can blow this cup up and, spread the news too about what I do, just because I try to do things differently than other space related channels on YouTube and elsewhere. Okay, Cyclonic says I can't explain his whole story without significant time. Well, I will look it up though. However, Cyclonics, thank you. If we develop the Alcubierre drive using exotic matter or something, we would become the UFOs across the galaxy, considering we could visit other systems in a fraction of the time. To observe the motive and stay separate, not wanting to contaminate or influence the good old prime directive. Yeah, I mean, that is a good point. And, it's actually the people who talk about the Alcubierre drive or the newer versions of it. Their claim is that space and time itself actually has a huge amount of what they call negative energy pent up inside it. If we could harness the energy in space and time itself, then it will eliminate a lot of our energy requirements for such a drive and also significantly reduce the requirements. And papers have been produced, peer-reviewed papers on this subject beyond just what Alcubierre put out. Newer versions of this drive have been produced. And by the way, the channel also talks about how these particular designs would also either be cylindrical or orb or saucer shaped craft, that these kinds of vehicles lend themselves towards the shape of a warp field. So once again, making a case for the fact that these vessels already exist and they've already been here and we've seen them and this is what UFOs are, blah, blah, blah. So, who knows? If we can build one of these things ourselves eventually, then I think it adds a pretty good amount of credence to the idea that somebody else could. Oh, well, thank you, Framrick, for what you just said. And Andy, they just pretty much repeated what I just said. Negative energy is a real phenomenon, says Framrick, the physics, but we need to harness exotic matter first. Of course, if we harness exotic matter, we could potentially build wormholes. If you hold the mouth of a wormhole open using exotic matter, the future could be very, very strange. Yes, well, quantum physics is something that confounded Einstein, that didn't fall within his particular frame of reference, something that he found to be confounding and didn't really like very much. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot yet to be discovered. And once again, to go back to Dr. Loeb, these ideas are the scientific community is going to maintain their opinions on these matters until literally some of these people die off and we get a new generation of people who are willing to look at things differently. Unfortunate, but probably true. It is our inclination to look at things from our own understanding of science as we understand it now. And then if something happens that doesn't seem to go along with that theory, then we're like, well, it must be something we don't understand, but it's got to correspond to what we already understand. And one example I want to give you, and look this up, an entire disk of matter around a developing star system completely vanished in the space of a few years. We observed the solar system in the process of its formation, and then all of a sudden all that matter was gone, and there's no black hole or anything else that we understand that could have taken all that matter someplace else. What caused it? We don't know. We don't have the slightest explanation for that, and now it's just drifted into obscurity. No one has really looked into it any further, and certainly nobody wants to talk about the possibility of perhaps some alien race using all that matter for some other purpose, or perhaps a wormhole sucking in it, or something that goes outside the frame of reference of what we usually talk about. But it is true that was there and it did happen. And what the hell could make an entire solar system's worth of matter just suddenly vanish? We can't begin to explain that, and we haven't even tried. Okay, negative energy is a real phenomenon. Yeah, the physics, but we got that up. Cyclonic says wormholes scare me. If placed vertically in a gravitational well and the liquid travels between the two ends, you get infinite kinetic energy. Well, yeah, and infinite kinetic energy, of course, is a frightening thing, and something that we would assume would be impossible, given that we haven't observed anything like that in the universe thus far. But once again, who knows? Who knows? That Mark Felton Chan is a pretty good professor of history, mainly into World War II and the scientific advances of the Germans, and loads more, says Andy Brown. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff to be looked up, and of course, it's tough to sift through the hype and the nonsense and the stuff that's actually worth watching. Bremick says, well, I'm an optimist. Discover the structure of the atom, atomic fission, good and bad uses. Discover solar fusion, giant electromagnets, the potential for nuclear fusion on Earth. Discover of the Higgs boson or beyond the standard model of physics, and who knows what the applications could be. And yes, let's hope that they're positive applications. We already have the negative applications of fusion. We've had hydrogen bombs forever. So let's find a positive application for it. One moment. Another advertisement for Bojangles. Okay. Bruden62, hello, how are you doing? So if the new ITER, ITER, okay, begins functioning, improves the science, I think warp drive will gain a better look. I apologize. ITER. I'm not as familiar with that one, and I listened to a lot of stuff about that not that long ago. But then there's a lot I don't know about it. But there have been a lot of advances and new ideas about that's the France fusion reactor. Thank you very much for that. Yes, if we do manage to make that work, and there have actually been breakthroughs in terms of, and once again, my brain can, as you know, can get a bit fuzzy sometimes, and all of these terms kind of fly by me occasionally. International Fusion Reactor Test. Thank you so much, Johnny. So yeah, if we finally get that breakthrough when it comes to getting more energy positive out of nuclear fusion versus the energy we're putting back into it, then then that's going to be a breakthrough that's going to create all kinds of possibilities. And yeah, the energy necessary for warp drive starts to become a possibility, although once again, it is a huge amount of energy we're talking about here. One, and it depends on which version you look at, but a lot of it would require more antimatter than we have matter in the universe. So, that of course is the most extreme type, but still, Alcubierre created this whole thing not as a practical sort of thing, but actually simply to demonstrate that in principle we could go faster than the speed of light by not moving. And I'm, of course, using a very famous quote from a pretty famous series of novels, but it is true. We could theoretically do that without violating the laws of relativity. Um, and that's mostly what he was trying to prove. Not that we could really do it in any kind of practical sense, but that it was theoretically possible. The way probably not a Mandalorian reference. That's funny. So yes, I have, high hopes, and also there have been other breakthroughs, by the way, in fusion besides just that. A lot of other people are working on it, and the first organization that actually comes through with a practical, positive energy result from fusion is going to have quite a lot of money, I would think, at their disposal. They're going to be able to sell that technology for an insane amount of money because it's going to provide a huge breakthrough, not just in terms of space travel, but in terms of everything else. There are so many things that can be done with practical fusion. Okay, so we have more people typing. Thank you so much to the folks who have shown up. We have over 200 people watching right now. Once again, there are many ways to support this channel. Obviously, in all through the description, Patreon. You can also there's lots of merch and other sorts of things, including this little ship right here. Get your own Starship. Make sure to use Angry 10 if you want to go ahead and do that. I have links through the descriptions of just about every video I do for Spaceship Mania. Just make sure to use Angry 10. You'll get a 10% discount, and this channel also receives some revenue off of that. So thank you very much for that. The thing is, as soon as we violate the laws of relativity, time travel is actually possible with all the paradoxes that go with it. And yes, and this is one of the reasons why most people regard these things as being impossible. That with because of all of these paradoxes with time travel, it's just something that we can't really do. However, if it were true and there were these changes taking place in the timeline or new timelines being created all the time because of time travel, how would we know? How would we know that these things weren't occurring, constantly? We would have no idea that these things were occurring. Could be occurring every moment and we would have no idea. So, it's impossible to prove, impossible to disprove, which is far from convincing evidence, obviously. As convenient as FTL travel would be, breaking causality and disregarding relativity sounds world-ending, possibly hinting that it isn't really possible to begin with. Yes, that is true, and once again, it's why the whole warp drive idea sounds the most doable because it doesn't break the laws of relativity. However, it does have a lot of other requirements which are pretty extreme, and those requirements vary depending on who you talk to. Framrick says, close to light speed travel is possible. Time dilation working on our side. Excellent antimatter rocket video. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I did do an antimatter rocket video on this subject, actually. We could spend decades traveling to other stars, but only age a couple of years. Yeah, if we got to within like 99.99% of the speed of light or something like that, it would be conceivably possible to travel all the way to other galaxies in a human lifetime. Obviously, the people we left behind would age by millions of years, or the civilization would, and most probably human civilization would go the way of the dinosaur in our absence. But yeah, time dilation actually gives us the theoretical possibility of traveling to other galaxies, even far away galaxies, within a human lifetime. It's amazing stuff, but possible theoretically anyway, because of time dilation. Some pretty exciting stuff, without question. And there is a pretty famous movie that has something to do with interstellar travel. And yeah, I may have given away the name of the movie. But anyway, he comes back, the star of the movie, finds that his daughter is an old lady and all that. And for some reason, this incredibly experienced astronaut that knows all this stuff about physics doesn't seem to understand time dilation, which I found to be pretty hard to believe, and was so devastated when he found that his daughter was an old lady and on her deathbed. Well, I mean, come on, man. I would think, I first learned about time dilation when I was 11 years old. What the hell? Why did you get chosen of all people if you didn't even know that? Okay. Johnny Spacer, I think most likely was humanity will expand beyond the solar system, will be something akin to island hopping. Moon, Mars, Ceres, Ganymede, or possibly Callisto, Titan, Triton, Pluto, throughout the Kuiper Belt, throughout the Oort cloud, eventually to other stars. That all does make a lot of sense. That does seem pretty likely to me too, by the way. And all that is very exciting, by the way. There's a lot in our own solar system to discover that we have yet to uncover. New things that we find out all the time. And our visit to Pluto, by the way, was the most recent of these. Well, one of the more recent ones. So many things about that planet that none of us even began to think was possible. We thought that it was just going to be something like our moon, something just pockmarked with craters, and it wasn't at all. It's a planet that's very much alive with geological processes that are entirely different than anything that we thought was possible. The whole idea of the force of major gas giants keeping a planet's core in a liquid state, because of the force of its gravity, for Europa and Titan and other places, all of that made sense. All of that was very interesting and something that made a lot of sense to us. But Pluto doesn't have any of that. Pluto doesn't have a nearby gas giant to do that. But guess what? It still has a very active geology for a planet of its size. And yes, I still call it a planet. That is a tough one. And yeah, we've got some theories about it, but we don't know for certain. And so there's a lot of very exciting discoveries yet to be made within our own solar system. Interesting that breakthrough starshot, interstellar travel, interplanetary travel, and reducing poverty on Earth all comes down to energy. If we can produce energy more effectively with fusion, antimatter, etc., we expand as a species, says Framrick, and you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. The more efficiently we can generate energy, the better it's going to be for everyone. And that's why we should be putting more money and more research into these kinds of things, as opposed to the billions and billions of dollars that we spend on generating energy in ways that we've been doing since the 19th century. It is absolutely absurd, and we have to bring that to a stop. Okay, perhaps dark energy is the answer to the Alcubierre drive. Its space-time expanding properties could potentially be harnessed. I have no idea how. Yeah, they don't really explain how in great detail in these little documentaries that they've done about it. I'm not going to call out this YouTube channel by name. I do like them. I think they do some interesting stuff. But still, I've gone through all of that and I'm still like, okay, how exactly are you supposed to be harnessing this energy? So I still don't quite get it. But maybe I've just got some more reading to do. Framick says exactly how the Polynesians did it. Very true. Incremental expansion, set up fuel depots, move outward. Yes, indeed. Okay. Oh, JFK on the moon. Hello. Good to have you back on the channel. NASA scientists have discovered a very weird molecule in the atmosphere of Titan, apparently. This was on the 29th of October, very recently. Titan's surface could host extraterrestrial life. I want to click on this, and yet I can't right now. I have to try to keep up with what's going on Discord. So I'm just going to click on that a little bit later on because I have to admit I am fascinated about that. I really hope it has something to do with what we call methanogenic life, life that breathes hydrogen and exhales methane using other types of chemicals as catalysts. And there was a theory put forward by a couple of exobiologists as to the exact conditions that would indicate the presence of methanogenic life on Titan. the lack of hydrogen at the surface, the amount of methane, the lack of, I think it's acetylene, I forget exactly, but some other chemicals that they predicted. Look it up sometime, but they predicted, I think in 2005, that if all of these conditions exist, then the existence of methanogenic life could be very possible on Titan. And then we had a lander go down there, and the Huygens lander from the ESA, and they confirmed all of these things. All of these predictions were indicated to be true at the surface of Titan. And what conclusions do we come from that? Well, the predominant conclusion was either our readings were wrong or there's some sort of natural process that we don't understand yet that caused it. Once again, we don't want to believe in methanogenic life. It doesn't fit into our current understanding of how life evolves. So instead, we stay with on our little island of knowledge, and as opposed to the sea of ignorance, and refuse to accept the possibility that, or at least the realistic possibility that there's methanogenic life there. Pluto has its moon Charon, and they both orbit a point outside Pluto, a very bizarre planetary system. Yes, it is indeed. Charon's gravitational pull shouldn't be enough, however, to keep the interior of Pluto liquid. There have been other theories about radioactive decay, that sort of thing, causing it to have a liquid interior. If that's the case, it means that Pluto's ocean has been around for a very, very long time. We're talking billions of years, and we're talking about a subsurface water ocean, given the fact that it has mountains made out of water ice. So if that's the case, if Pluto has a subsurface water ocean that's been around for billions of years, that's more than enough time for life to develop. And who knows what kind of life. And we won't know until we go out there, will we? So yeah, lots of exciting things to explore, both in our own solar system and certainly beyond. Another advertisement for Bojangles. Excuse me, throat gets so dry. It's because I can't keep my mouth shut, as most of you know. Okay, so Johnny says it seems as if dark energy is the most effective in space time that is absent of matter. Matter affects both space and time. Just a thought. Yeah, there's actually there's a video game that had dark energy as its primary power source. This alien species that used it, and the way to produce dark matter was to take everything out of a container, and by everything I mean everything. All of the matter, all of the photons, all of the dark matter, and leave it with absolutely nothing. And when you do that, then dark energy simply comes into existence. It manifests like a flame and creates itself, so to speak. A really interesting idea. A perfect vacuum causes spatial expansion, says Cyclonics. Yeah, and maybe that's dark energy that does it. It's hard to say. And another thing that was talked about, by the way, in this interview with Dr. Loeb, is that as the universe continues to expand, we are going to be unable to see faraway galaxies, to see them at all, because we will be expanding away from one another relativistically at greater than the speed of light, which means that the light energy or the visible light from these galaxies will never reach us. And as a result, we will be unaware of the presence of all of these other galaxies. Will science then become some kind of a religion, some sort of written information that once we could see these things and now we can't? And then what? Is the scientific community going to say, well, we don't have any physical evidence of this, so it can't exist? Well, it did a long time ago, but what proof do we have of that aside from somebody writing it down? So, it's there's a lot of strange thoughts that that folks can come up with when they're in the shower sometimes. And kind of a dark future if you think about it, when it comes to the fact that eventually we and the Andromeda galaxy are going to meld into a single gigantic galaxy, and the rest of the galaxies in the universe are going to expand outward to the point to where we can no longer observe them. And so the very existence of of those galaxies and the rest of the universe, we're just going to have to take it on faith. Very strange thing to say if you are a believer in science and not faith. Framrick says, I would love to send a telescope out to the solar focus. It's a gravitational lens point on the edge of the solar system that could bring exoplanets into very sharp focus. And Framrick provides a link there. 100 billion fold magnification or so. Wow. Could spot something the size of New York City on an exoplanet. Yeah, if we could do that, then what's the point of breakthrough Starshot, to go all the way back to the beginning of our conversation? There is energy in the vacuum. The Casimir effect pushes plates apart. Well known experiment on a small scale. Dark energy is postulated to be the cause of the rapidly increasing expansion of the universe. Hope that we can detect it and measure it one day. And by the way, we believe that dark matter exists. We believe that dark energy exists, but we haven't detected it. So, why do we come to the conclusion that it does exist? Just because there isn't enough matter in the universe to create the phenomena that we're seeing right now? Well, is that really completely convincing evidence? I don't think so. Not until we actually find it, measure it, detect it. So, right now, it's just a theory. And yet, scientists talk about it as if it's of a fact, talk about it in a factual sense. That's a little odd and a bit hypocritical, I think, when they so quickly dismiss other theories that of astronomical phenomena that we observe, and try to tie it into an extraterrestrial civilization. And they dismiss that for lack of evidence, but embrace the concept of dark matter, even though we have yet to detect it and put it into a laboratory. I don't know. As I say, it seems a bit hypocritical. Okay. Ricker, hello. Solar materials, conversion efficiency breakthroughs, and Tesla battery efficiency leaps and supercapacitor acquisition leave expectations high that more great safe discoveries are nearing. Yes, indeed. Supercapacitors, and with supercapacitors, to go back to breakthrough Starshot, you charge up the lasers, these huge capacitors, produce these huge energy emissions with these lasers, these 50 gigawatt blasts, and then the lasers have to be recharged. The capacitors have to be recharged over the course of a couple of days. And then Alien Zookeeper goes way back to Breakthrough Starshot. What technology would be great for exploring the outer solar system? Probably as a shakedown for the Interstellar. Yes, yes, indeed. And besides, as I mentioned before, the technology for Breakthrough Starshot doesn't just have to be used for that. It can be used to propel spacecraft across the solar system at very high rates of speed. Maybe not in percentages of the speed of light, but certainly at much faster speeds than chemical rockets. And, besides that, we also can use it to deflect asteroids, as we've talked about. So, yeah, personally, I think it's worth doing for a lot of different reasons. Cyclonics says dark matter and energy are really just placeholder names for phenomenon we don't really grasp. And yeah, I would say no truer thing has been said. Cyclonics. We don't really know what these things are. We're studying it. We have ideas. We have theories, but so far we can't say for certain. Johnny says some speculate that dark matter is actually microscopic black holes left over from the Big Bang. Yeah, that's an interesting idea, isn't it? Especially since it's been postulated that black holes eventually dissolve. So, of course, the question comes up, if they dissolve, where does all that matter go and energy go that they gobbled up? It has to go somewhere, but it doesn't. What's the deal with that? So yeah, there's so many unknowns, so many things that we still don't understand. Framrick, as always with science, hypothesis. We think something happens based on observations. Proof, we have measured something to a suitably reliable degree, and others have measured it too. We are at the hypothesis stage with dark matter and dark energy. Why can't we use breakthrough Starshot technology using lasers or circular lunar mass driver? And Framrick loves that idea, by the way, to study our own solar system in more detail. Yes, and a huge number of 1 gram probes swarming out to the asteroid belt, outer planets, Kuiper belt, Oort cloud. Yeah, yeah. Avinash, yes, black holes energy dissipates or dissolves, as it has sometimes been said, through Hawking radiation. It was Hawking who actually came up with this idea. But yes, he's the one who came up with this theory, and it seems to be supported with a fair amount of observational fact. But once again, we can't be 100% certain. Okay, Framrick is typing right now. Once again, thank you everybody for showing up. We've had well over 200 people watching pretty consistently. You know how to be part of this. Be a Patreon supporter. There's lots of other ways to support this channel in the description of just about every video I put out. Or if you don't have the money, and I understand you got no obligation to be paying my bills, then support me with a subscription or a thumbs up, something along those lines. I would really appreciate it. Okay, we have people typing right now, and we're down to about 10 minutes left. So that time, be sure to click that like button, says Johnny. Yes, thank you very much for that. Okay, so we've, as I say, 10 minutes. So we still have a little time left to discuss. Amazing phenomenon. The energy density around a black hole is sufficient to create two particles, one of matter, one of antimatter. One falls into the black hole, the other one travels outward, and the black hole loses energy. Hawking radiation. Very interesting. Framrick, I really wish you had been on that on that total space podcast that we did. Your knowledge would have been pretty cool on that. And once again, just a quick announcement for Total Space. I recorded it on Friday. It's coming out on Monday and being done every Monday by a supporter of our channel, another Space Nut or ASN. Okay, so still got some time, and no problem, Framrick. I'm looking forward to talking to you on the next one. Oh, my throat, I'll tell you. Wow. Another advertisement. For those of you who don't know what Bojangles is, it's a chicken place. It's very popular here in the South. They do all kinds of what I find to be really delicious and horrible for you stuff. They also sell sweet tea, which is a religion in the South, but I don't drink that. I drink unsweetened tea because I'm a damn Yankee. So anyway, oh, okay. Cyclonics, you've been invited on Total Space too. Well, by all means, show up. Is it worth sending people out on an interstellar journey, or is it always better to send probes? I think that we should send people out on interstellar journeys at some point. That was one of our topics that we talked about as well. Interstellar arcs being the ultimate lifeboat for the human species. Traveling to another star system once we confirm that it has a habitable planet, and preserving the future of the human race by going to another star system, preferably an orange dwarf, not a red dwarf, but an orange dwarf. Those are not as violent and prone to put out bursts of energy and continue the human species that way. So yeah, I think that it is worth it, in my opinion. And there have been some theories about using a much, much bigger version of Breakthrough Starshot to accelerate a very large spacecraft to 50% of the speed of light using ridiculously powerful lasers. But Ricola, yes, I will be soothing my throat soon enough. Probes don't die or get pregnant. But isn't that part of it? I mean, to sustain the future of the human species, isn't it in our interest for that small group of humans to get a little bit bigger? Although the increase of population on that space arc would have to be strictly controlled. The Nexus Aurora Medicine Group is completing a research project on mammalian fertilization in space. Well, that's intriguing. I am very interested to see what their results are. Framrick says we have to do crude interstellar travel in a future episode. Cryo ships versus generation ships versus breeder ships versus DNA ships. Yeah, yeah, I think we should. And by the way, another ship would be a artificial intelligence ship. That is to say, put our own knowledge, our own minds, our own psyche, so to speak, because technology travels through space a lot easier than living human beings do. Reproduce our intelligence in machines and send that out into space. Would that not be a better way of doing things? And once again, perhaps aliens are doing it that way already. Hard to say. The future of humanity can't just be around one small G8 yellow star in an unremarkable corner of the Milky Way. I couldn't agree with you more. There are tons and tons of orange dwarfs and red dwarfs, orange dwarfs being a better candidate because they tend not to flare up, although red dwarfs slow down. They don't flare up as often the older they get, and they become more and more likely candidates for habitable planets. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We do need to expand out into the galaxy. And I'm pretty certain that somebody else already has to at least some degree. We just haven't taken notice of it yet, or we have noticed it and we just simply refuse to admit that that's what it is. Off the wall question. SETI, do you think the first species we might make contact with will be organic, extinct, as in picking up old knowledge and signals, or machines such as AI or robots? I do believe that the first I think that actually we have already received contact. We have received signals on the hydrogen line that we expected those are the types of signals that we expect to receive. The problem is they haven't repeated. And that's happened several times actually in the history of SETI and privately supported SETI. The problem is they haven't repeated, and so we don't count them as being real, even though all the signals we've sent out haven't repeated either. So that also seems to be a bit a bit hypocritical. But yeah, I would say the first signal that we're likely to get is from a Van Neumann probe. For those of you who are familiar with those self-replicating probes that are sitting in our own solar system, keeping us under observation. Something like that would be impossible to detect until it became active. And so when it finally decides that we are worth communicating with, it's going to communicate with us and say, hey, guess what? Here I am. And this civilization sent me out 500,000 years ago because we observed your planet. We figured that eventually intelligent life would develop there. But I saw all these nuclear weapons and everything that you guys were doing and figured that contacting you wouldn't be a good idea. But now I finally am. I think that sort of signal is probably going to be the most likely, and it's going to blow our mind and probably scare the hell out of us when we detect that signal coming from within our own solar system. That's how I feel. Technically, that von Neumann probe is a Bracewell probe, lurks in a system, makes contact when we are ready for it. And no reason to apologize, Framrick. I do like all of these. Um, the Van Neumann probe says, and we are still looking for signs of intelligence. Yes, indeed, and that might be exactly what it would say. Who knows? It could have a sense of humor. Van Halen probe. Very funny. Oh yes, and Eddie Van Halen passed away recently. R.I.P. guy. Quite a talent and a big loss, from what I understand. My son told me about that. He's a very talented guitarist. My son is. Okay, we have a couple more comments coming in, and then I think we're going to be wrapping up. So let's get our last comments in, and then unfortunately, and once again, thank you to all of you for showing up, all of our audience. Once again, you know how to join this channel, or if not, please like and subscribe, and keep pushing this channel to new heights and push this cup closer to destruction. Um, yes. Well, thank you, Andy. And yes, I am very impressed with all of you guys' contributions. It's wonderful to have so many of you contributing your knowledge and your education to the little bit that I know. We've also lost Sean Connery, yes, indeed, who starred in the movie You Only Live Twice, which had the first SpaceX chomper Starship shown. All right, Ricker is typing our last comment, and then we're going to be closing. So once again, this has been a fascinating conversation. It's gone all over the place. Very sorry about the ads. It was kind of necessary because of some mysterious things that happened with my most recent. Oh, yes, and Cyclonics is working on some interesting stuff too. Our gravity amplifier is a technology or a necessary mature science that will accelerate to journeys in Mars exploration? That is a very interesting question. I think one for another episode. So until we are ready to decide whether or not we should go beyond our solar system and to our closest neighbor, Proxima Centauri and Alpha Centauri now, or if we should be concentrating on our own solar system, both of which have powerful arguments either way. I urge all of you to stay angry about space.